Hi everybody, Michelle McClunan, astrologer and life navigator, and I'm bringing you an astrology update for the full moon, which is coming up on the 8th of December. And if you live over America side, then it would be late hours of the 7th. So in South Africa, it's early hours of the 8th, and it's quite a blustery, mutable, which means very changeable full moon. But there's quite a lot to talk about, so I'm going to see if I can unpack it for you a little bit. So the full moon is in the sign of Gemini, which is opposite Sagittarius. And so this full moon is very linked to the new moon 2 weeks ago, which was in Sagittarius. So if you didn't watch that video, you can always look back and see what that was about, because it's a kind of a continuation, and if you like, a culmination of whatever was planted back 2 weeks ago. The Sagittarius Gemini axis is the communication axis. So this full moon is very much about communication, with it being in Gemini, the sign of communication. Now, what sort of changes this to any old Gemini full moon is that the moon itself is in a very close connection. We call it a conjunction in astrology to the planet Mars. And Mars is currently going retrograde, which kind of can intensify the energy of the planet. And when whatever it touches, it sort of ignites, it amplifies, it pushes. Mars is the masculine, pushy kind of energy, and Moon is the feminine, being energy. So there's a bit of a conflict at this full moon, but it's quite empowering as well, because Mars can energize. So it can energize our thoughts, it can energize our communications, it can certainly up our thoughts in terms of lots going on. There are 6 planets this full moon in mutable signs, which is kind of a restless, changeable, adaptable. It's not a stable energy. Mutable energy is really the energy of possibility, where you're holding the energy of a possibility that might or might not play out. It's not necessarily the energy to get things done just yet. That's coming. As when the sun starts to move into Capricorn, that's when we actually start becoming a little bit more strategic, and we start actually moving forward in a methodical way. The Sagittarius and Gemini axis is kind of more flighty. It's more unstable, and therefore it allows us to actually open to possibilities without latching onto anything. So the other thing that came to me when I was looking at the energy of this full moon is that the Archer, which is Sagittarius, which is where the sun is, and Venus is currently there as well. The Archer, the Sagittarius is the Archer, but it's half man, half beast. So it symbolizes our human side and our spiritual side. And Sagittarius asks us to free ourselves from just the personality and see that we are much, much more than that. So at this time of the year, with these kind of alignments, we're asked to see the bigger picture, to get a bigger perspective, to see what the learnings are that we've actually learned through this year, and actually in the last 12 years, which I'm going to explain in a sec. So if you just look at the energy of Sagittarius, being the Archer, pulling back that arrow and then firing, this is a time to kind of pull back in a way. It's that pause moment before we actually commit. It's saying reassess, which is Mars retrograde. Reassess, re-look at. Just look at what you've planned and see if anything needs to change. Look at your belief systems. Are they still valid? What has shifted for you? And this is a spiritual shift. It's not necessarily just a personality shift. It might not be visible in your outer life, but there might be something really deep shifting inside you. This full moon has got the capacity energetically to help us unstick ourselves with that Mars push. So if you've been feeling stuck, if you've been unable to see the bigger picture, this could be the full moon which sort of allows you to actually get more perspective, to step back, pull back the arrow and see, what have I learned? What have I learned this year? It's the ending of a year. a calendar year. So it's always a good time to, before silly season starts, before we get too busy with family and commitments and Christmas and all of that that you might celebrate, is to just pull back and say, what's this year been about? What have I learned? How have I grown? What do I need to let go of? What am I still holding on to? What is constricting me and what is expanding me? Sagittarius is the sign of expansion. It's the sign of looking at things from a much bigger picture. So the ego side, which is the human side, might feel that it's been a very difficult year and you might have been stretched, you might have been pulled and pushed and punished. But the bigger side of it, the soul side, is saying, but what have you learned on a soul level? So this is what this full moon is really asking us to do. It's asking us to quieten the information that's coming in from all sides, because that's Gemini. Lots of information, lots of ideas, lots of busyness, lots of things that we have to do, lots of places we have to go. What is my goal? How am I going to get there? It's all a bit furry and a bit foggy right now. The full moon is in a square to Neptune, which kind of, it's still a bit unclear. So it's just to hold a space for that unknown. It's, can I be okay with not knowing? Just now, just in this moment, because this will also pass, but there is something quite beautiful in that place of unknowing, because it's also the place of infinite potential and possibility. So my papers are moving around a bit, it's a bit windy here. So it's just to actually pull back, pause, and say, can I just be okay with not knowing quite where I'm going to aim these arrows? I'm pulling back. The other thing about this full moon is it's ruled by Mercury, because Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is in the sign of Capricorn, which again, it says to us, okay, there's a lot going on in our heads, pull back, consider. Capricorn is a considered energy. It's not a sort of a gung-ho energy that just goes off and shoots the breeze. It's going to look at things, going to weigh things up. It's going to say, yes, that's sensible, that's not sensible. How do we do this in a conscientious kind of way? So that's another hint for this full moon. If you feel that you need to say something to somebody, it's probably best to really take some deep breaths and to say, okay, just hang on a sec. Let me just pull back, breathe, see what's going on for myself, and then say what I need to say. Because Sagittarius, Gemini, that axis can be a bit unsubtle. It can be a bit sort of shoot from the hip, and especially when we're ignited. And this full moon could ignite. Mars symbolizes anger, and it can be a retrograde anger. So it can be an anger coming up from somewhere that you don't even know why it's coming up, or a vague irritation, and then that can shoot out of your mouth with the moon in Gemini. So it's just a time to actually stand back, pull back a little bit, also to get some time out for yourself at this full moon. Remember, full moons are always a time of culmination. It's big energy. It shines a light on whatever is going on for us. It shines a light specifically, more specifically, on the relationship that we have with other people, with ourselves, with our environments. So just be, maybe do some stream of conscious journaling. Really see what's going on in your mind so that you clear the mind. This is a clearing, it's a letting go, it's a release process, this full moon. The other thing that's happening is that the ruler of Sagittarius, where we still got the sun, is Jupiter. And Jupiter has a 12-year cycle. And this month, it actually moves out of Pisces and into Aries. So that happens on the 20th of December. It's already made a visit to Aries before, a little while ago, but this is now its real beginning of its real journey in Aries, which basically means that it's the end of a 12-year cycle. This right now is the end of a 12-year cycle and the beginning of a new opportunity cycle. Jupiter is the planet of opportunity. It's the big, expansive planet. It says, okay, look beyond. Look to see the bigger picture. What have you learned? How have you grown inside? I read something the other day, and then it said, I realized that I would be dealing with this situation. I'm dealing with this situation differently to what I dealt with it, how I would have dealt with it last year. So it's to look at that and say, who was I 12 years ago? Where was I 12 years ago? What was I doing 12 years ago? What were my priorities 12 years ago? Where was my perspective? What was true for me 12 years ago? And where am I now? And how have I grown? And what am I releasing from that 12-year cycle as well? So it's a good idea to just look back. It would have been January, round about January, sort of mid to the end of January 2011. That was when the end of the previous 12-year cycle happened. So to look back and say, what am I releasing from this big 12-year cycle is a good idea. It happens the day before the solstice. So solstice is always a really, really powerful energy as well. I know here in the Garden Route, there's a solstice festival. A lot of people for centuries, forever, have celebrated the solstice. So, in South Africa, it's the summer solstice. In the northern hemisphere, it's the winter solstice. So obviously it changes depending on what hemisphere you're in. But look at the solstice and see what you're giving birth to, what is coming up for you at the solstice. And so it's quite powerful energy that's coming up. It's beautiful energy. It's really the energy of seeing things at a bigger perspective, pulling back, allowing. After that solstice, the sun starts to move into Capricorn. Venus would have already moved into Capricorn, and then it'll be followed by other movements into Capricorn. And Capricorn is a much more solid energy. It's much more about, okay, what seeds am I planting for the year ahead? How am I going to tackle the year ahead? From an earthed, grounded, practical, kind of mature perspective. That's Capricorn. So I pulled a card, and the card that I pulled was Diana. She actually fell out the pack as I was shuffling. And she is the queen of the wilderness. And her message is the language of the natural world is a frequency of love. This is my mother tongue, which I really love that. Diana represents the call to embody a more primal connection to the wilderness that exists within us. So there's a whole thing about who Diana was, which I won't go into. But what her message says is very apt for this full moon, because I think that this message is going to help ground us. Sometimes the answer is simple. An elemental need to just walk barefoot in the grass, or even better, the mud. Sometimes we get so caught up in what's happening or what isn't happening, Gemini, that we forget to just be. We forget that there is a tremendous power surging up from earth, wanting to take whatever energy is no longer serving us. We forget that we can commune with the trees, those ancient protectors and elders whose language comes with the help of the wind and the slow, soft caress that touches our cheek. I can feel it right now. Answers sometimes need to come from the basic desire of the body to feel grounded here on earth. Diana is associated with fertility, the phases of the moon, and the ability to communicate with animals. Of course, not with any human language, but with the frequency of love and intention which animals perceive. If we open ourselves up to it, we can connect to the natural, to the wisdom in the natural world, even if we live far away from it. Even if we're deep in the heart of the busiest city, a sign on a bus, a logo on a t-shirt, a card that someone sends us may carry an image of an animal that wants to reach us. Or maybe we're visited by a bird, by a little tiny insect, or something from the natural world that has a message for us. Be on the lookout for that. They've always got messages for us. We do not have to be in the wilderness to accept the wisdom of the natural world. The wilderness is within us. We are part of it. There's so much more that we can receive from the wordless life all around us. We just have to develop the heart that can hear us. So that is so beautiful. And then there's another sort of intention here. What spirit animal has medicine or a message to give me in this moment? There's nothing nothing happens by accident. So if a little spirit animal or a big spirit animal appears in a dream or in your actual life, what's the message? What have they come to say? If you're communicating with an animal, what's that animal saying to you? That's that wild sort of Sagittarian, half man, half beast. It's saying, see the wild within you. See that you aren't separate from it. You are it. You have it inside you. And so just embrace that over the next few weeks, over the season that we're heading towards. And so I'm wishing you a really beautiful next few weeks and a beautiful solstice. And then we have a new moon towards the end of the month again, which I'll check in with you on. If you've enjoyed this, please would you subscribe and hit the notification button. I put out a video every 2 weeks. In our inner space community, I run a community with my partner John, and we are covering this month, which there's still time because we have 2 Zoom calls. Our next Zoom call is on Tuesday. So the theme is expanded horizons. So it really is preparing ourselves for the new calendar year, where we obviously want to start afresh and we want to plant new seeds for a new year. So this time now is the pulling back, is the expanding the horizons. It's the seeing what we've learned, how we've grown, what is our perspective now. It's a really important time of the year. And it's sort of a culmination, a fruition of this really intense year that we've had, and an acknowledgement of how we've grown and where we've come to and where we are now, an acknowledgement of that. We are starting a Journey to Freedom course in January. It'll be the end of January. If you are keen to find out details of that, you can pop me an email, or you can go to our website, journeysofawakening.com. And if you'd like a reading, let me know. It'll probably be in January, but it's best to probably book it now because I do get quite busy in January. Thank you so much for listening. Have a beautiful, beautiful day. Remember to take some time out each day, during the day. Pause, breathe, pull back, step back. Because as we step back, we step into our power, into our beingness. So that's it from me. Lots of love, and thanks very much for watching.